Shanghai is a city of 26 million people, perhaps the biggest city in the world, huge city and very industrialized at the heart of China's financial world and business. Government assign you to live where you live. You can say, oh, today I work in Beijing. I don't like Beijing. Let's move to Shanghai tomorrow. No, you don't have that right. For example, of course, there's a policy that you can't attack Chinese leaders, communist leaders. So if you say something or did something, they arrest you and put you in jail. Sometimes people got shot. Shanghai is the economic heart of China. Beijing is the political heart.
Namaskar. Hello and welcome to PGurus channel. I'm your host 𝙒𝙖𝙩𝙨𝘼𝙥𝙥. Something interesting happening at Shanghai. Is it really a lockdown because COVID is raging, or are there other reasons for China to undertake this step? What is really happening? For a different perspective than what we had from 𝙒𝙧𝙤𝙪, we have China expert. She was born in China, Sasha Gong. And Sasha is going to give us her perspective on what could really be happening in Shanghai. So let's go ahead and welcome Sasha. Sasha, namaskar and welcome to PGurus channel.
Hi, good to see you again. Very nice to see everybody. And I saw my last few segments got quite good reception, and I just want to thank you and thank every listeners.
My pleasure, Sasha, and you are much adored. And see, what we are doing in this channel is something that people are not doing outside in many YouTube channels. You would have to go through many to get to that exact extract that we are providing in a very crisp fashion. So, Sasha, I have a question for you. You said that you have a slightly different perspective on what's happening in Shanghai than just a lockdown everything, lockdown homes, give people noodles and see how far they can survive. It's a slightly different, you have a slightly different take on it. With your permission, I can start the PowerPoint going at this point, or I can do it a little bit later, whenever you say, take it away.
Yeah, well, you put the first PowerPoint, which is just the topic, lockdown in Shanghai. Let me first say a few words as introduction as to why I picked this subject. Because since Shanghai is a city of 26 million people, perhaps the biggest city in the world, huge city and very industrialized at the heart of China's financial world and business. So everybody knows Shanghai. And this time, Shanghai has been locked down since late March. So it's 1 month now, and it's supposed to be unlocked down today, but I haven't seen any news. And so far, closed all business in Shanghai, communication in Shanghai. A person-to-person communication. Totally sort of destroy the business in Shanghai there. The major city, look at it. It's only so far, the death numbers, it's about 7. And the age of the deaths, COVID deaths, well, this morning, at least yesterday, they announced 3 more people died. It's between the ages between 89 and 91. And you have 20-something thousand people who have symptoms. Some severe symptoms, but only a few of them are severe symptoms. And like 200,000, that's a fluid number. So, but in that neighborhood, people who are infected, but no symptom.
Asymptomatic, yeah.
Right. Well, basically, Shanghai as a big city, normally every day hundreds of people died. And for that, people say it's just a big flu. For that big flu, you lock down a major city, create enormous misery there. And I give you one example. A very famous Chinese economist, a pro-Chinese government economist, whose last name is First name Xianping, Xianping, this Chinese called, very famous. and he was very pro-government. And then he tweeted a few days ago. He said his 89-year-old mom had a kidney failure. So they sent her to a hospital. Hospital said without COVID test, they could not take her in. So they did the test, waited for the test for 4 hours, and her mom died without getting in. So we are getting miserable stories like that. It looked like people who died for not being able to get to the hospital. There are 10 or 20 more times people die than those who contract the COVID. So it's a very miserable situation. Neighborhood are locked down, and people could not get food. They scream murder, said I have no food, and the food delivery not prompt. Children are locked down, and the adults are locked down, and the people committed suicide because they could not stand staying alone at home anymore. So look at all this misery and all this minimum of effect for COVID, because they said, as expert and everybody knows, Omicron just spread, and the lockdown doesn't do much good for the spreading of Omicron. So basically, in most of the world, in the rest of the world, people just ignore it, treat it as a big flu. That's all. But why China lockdown? It looks so stupid. It's just, as a lot of Chinese say, stupidity beyond belief. Why? But when you see a government policy which is so persistent, because this lockdown, Shanghai is not the first city lockdown. We have Wuhan lockdown, we have Xi'an lockdown, we have many cities. Shenzhen was locked down not long ago. We have so many lockdowns, and so ineffective. Why? The question is why. So sometimes when I look at the government policies, when they are stupid beyond explanation, there must be another explanation. That's what I want to explain from my point of view. What's that? So that's the second slide. Thank you. So if you look at today's Shanghai, and you look at first, the roads are empty. And then who are those people wearing white? The Chinese actually gave them a name, that white guard. You see, during the Cultural Revolution, you have red guards. Now they have white guards. These white guards are everywhere. They have all the power. They can stop you. They can search you. They can seal your home. They check your ID. They turn your car back. They said, stop moving. So these are the white guards. And remember, in an image of any of this society, whatever, you would see police and with police outfit, and the doctors at doctor outfit, whatever. It's clear. But in China, in Shanghai, now you see everyone with authority are wearing white. That's how they got their nickname, White Guard. The only difference between someone who's a social worker, they would wear something, and they only move in the neighborhood. Someone who's a doctor, and they would mark a doctor across there. And someone who's police, they would mark police there. But basically, they're all wearing the same uniform. So that's today's Shanghai. Well, it's very hard to believe, the biggest in Shanghai. So today's Shanghai, this slide, I want to explain why. So before I explain why, I need to explain what the system was today, that was in China. What's the system of communism was in China? That's a big subject, I know. But without explaining that, I cannot explain what's happening in Shanghai. I hope I made myself clear so far.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, so communism, luckily India never actually went through, even Nehru like socialism, it was never communism. The difference of communism, communist control, and we think of socialism, some state-owned economies, something like Northern Europe. That's a very different system. Think of Stalin and think of Mao. The state ownership does not, let me put it this way, the state ownership is one of the main features of communism. What makes everybody feel this, fear it, and suffer is the communist social control system, what we call the party state. What's a party state does not only mean one party control power. We have that in other countries, like in Japan, Japanese people always joke we have a one-party system because one faction, the other faction of one party control the politics for a long time. But India has the National Congress, but not now, of course, but for a long time. So that's not a one-party system. The real one-party system means one-party control, means no other party can get even close to the power. And then under this one-party control, they set up a system to control everybody and every move of everybody. Like in China I lived since 1956, they built what they call 𝙒𝙂𝘀𝗍 system, which is the translations like a household registration system. Everybody, every soul in China, you have to register yourself to the government. You have to register not only male, female, that's basic demographic data. You also have to register where you live. And where you live, you have no choice. Government assign you to live where you live. You can say, oh, today I work in Beijing. I don't like Beijing. Let's move to Shanghai tomorrow. No, you don't have that right. The most important part here is that China made its two-tier system in its household registration, which means city and the urban area and the rural area. If you live in the rural area, it's close to be impossible for you to move to urban area, close to be impossible. Sometimes even not in marriage. If you marry say a rural girl married a city boy, it takes a long time for that girl, maybe decades, for that girl to be able to move in with her husband in the city and get a city registration. So what happens, the government actually guarantee people in the city to have jobs. Doesn't mean, it's good jobs, but, you have jobs and you have no starvation there. Well, starvation, at least not in the rural side. In the rural area, they just put you in your village. If you want to travel outside of your village, in the worst time, you need the party leaders there to issue you a certificate. For example, you see that picture of the beggars. That picture came from the 1960s during the Great Famine. But in a famine, which happens a lot in China under Mao, in order to keep the city looks clean and good and nobody can see how many poor peasants you have, all peasants, if you have to go begging, you must obtain a certificate from the party leaders in your village. The certificate usually reads like this: Comrade so-and-so came from a poor peasant's family, which means in the communist eyes, it's a good, poor peasants before 1949. And because of some difficulties in the region, he or she is allowed to make his own living outside of the area. And with time limits, say 2 weeks and 1 month something. If you travel without a certificate, you would be arrested. Well, if you unluckily, if you happen to be born or come from what they call a rich peasant or landlord family, that's rich peasant and landlord before 1949. After that, during the land reform, they took every penny from you, right? So, and if you happen to, your destiny is to stay there and you die. Nobody cares. So in social control, the Chinese Communist Party in the 1950s and 60s built a very tight social control system. That control system includes, everyone from birth, from cradle to grave. They covered every minute of your time. Every minute of your time, that the party knows where you go. The party knows that the reform is before the reform still. The party knows where you go. The party knows what you think. At least they try to know. And if you go to work, your work unit, they will organize political sessions like 3 times a week, and you are forced to make statements. If someone, I did that all the time. If I refuse to say something, said I have nothing to say, the party leader would come to you, said, you have nothing to say? How come? You must have something to say. Say something. And either you say something flattering the party, or you say something you really think, and then you're in real trouble. And then you get constant visit and even later, even jail time. So under Mao, in that system, people are controlled. Your whole body is so like slavery. Your whole body, your soul, your work, everything is controlled. You're fixed in the place the party wants you to work. And the words of that time is, you must be a screw in the party machine. So wherever they screw you in, you're in. That's the word. So to sum up, in that time, the party built a total social control, which is the main feature of a communist system. As a person living there, you have minimum freedom. Really, you have no freedom. The minimum freedom, you have the freedom at the level of an animal, perhaps even less than an animal, because you have to work. Anyway, that's the social system. All right, then let's go to the next slide. So under the Mao system, China became such a place without much initiative. People just work like slaves. After Mao died, in the early 1980s, the reform started. Remember when the reform started, that was no private enterprise. 80% of China's population lived in rural areas. They could not move. They earned very little. They starved to death. So Chinese people are so desperate. And I grew up in starvation. I know that. So desperate for any opportunity they can have. So when the reform came, the first thing they did, the Chinese was that now the party said, okay, before the party have all this control, parties, local organization, all the way penetrate to micro level of society. And they also have neighborhood association, they have militia guards guarding people. They have all this organization penetrate to every level of society. But the good part of that is they can control society. The bad part is that, well, people are fixed. When industrial age came, when reform came, and when Hong Kong, Taiwan, and foreign investments went into China, they need workers. They need people. They need, first thing, very soon in the early 1990s, even in the late 80s, the Chinese government relaxed that social system, relaxed a lot. First, early 80s, they allow peddlers, they allow people to sell eggs on the street. Before that, even sell eggs are illegal. So they allow people to do something like that, and you can sell eggs and you can barter. So when I was a student in the 80s in China, we barter things all the time in the free market, or in that time called black market. You bartered, well, some of your school supplies with eggs, and so you can have a feast with 4 eggs as a big feast, and something like that. And it's first the system relaxed a little, and then people allowed to move more, well, have some movement between cities. So for example, they allow all the forced down use, sent down use. They, people like including Xi Jinping at that time, sent to the countryside in the 60s. They allowed them to go back to cities, and but the government could not arrange them to have jobs. So the government allowed them to do some private business, mostly sales or this. And the people, Chinese people are very enterprising. And they started to have trade. And that time, the most popular trade was to smuggle jeans from Hong Kong. Jeans and, well, the biggest item was motorcycle. So in the 80s, when the social control relaxed, and in the 90s, when you see the big investment going in, a big factory, China became the workshop of the world. And in that time, the social control system, in that time, things relaxed. So people start have private business and build different entity. They start to move, and the government have to allow them to move. And the work peasants move to cities, and city people launch business. So society changed enormously. In this change, what changed to the government? The government lost its social control means. You can no longer control, well, it still control some, who live where. The cities, huge cities like Shanghai, have built. Some cities, for example, there was one city in my hometown in Hunan. When I was there in the 1960s, it has about 50 to 60,000 people. Now it's a city of 5 million. Huge. So now suddenly, more than half of China's population became urban. You just think of how big a change. In the late 70s or early 80s, 80% of China's population were rural. And by the beginning of 2000, 50% of China's population are urban. That's a huge, huge, huge change. But with this huge change, the Chinese government, the communist government, lost a lot of control. They simply lost control. They lost control in rural areas. It privatized. Rural areas sometimes became this sort of mafia-run places. But the party organization, they have power, but that power is no longer the authoritarian power or totalitarian power from the center. It become very local. And you have private business who just don't care that much of your party have power, and the party itself, opportunity of corruption is enormous. Enormous. We are talking about millions, hundreds of millions, billions, and hundreds of billions. That level, corruption escalated. So when you have corruption, the party itself as the Leninist party erodes. It's not the power erode, power change. They took power and make private business and do that, but Mao's social control power totally eroded. except in one area. That one area, if you look at, is the one-child policy. Since the 1990s, the Chinese, at that time, China was approaching 1.3 billion population. So the urgency the Chinese government felt is that they could not feed that many mouths. So they have to control the population. Chinese family, I have 3 siblings. And my mom's a professor, but if she wants to give birth to more, she could. So normally Chinese families have, my generation, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, lots of children. And then the government said, no, we could not afford that. Let's accumulate, when people spend money to feed their kids, they would not be able to concentrate on doing, making money or investing and doing all this. So they put a very strict one-child policy. Now, the one-child policy, in their minds, that it will balance China's population. So the Chinese use the old communist system. You have neighborhood committee, you have local committee, and then the committee itself, the oldest committee, the one-child policy team, became the only powerful social control team for the Chinese government. If you look at the 4 pictures, look at the very brutal slogans they put there. The left-hand upper side, they said, we prefer to let blood flow like river than having one more child. That means they capture pregnant women and even the pregnant second child, for say 6 months. They force the person, sometimes even older, even 8 months, 9 months. We saw pictures that they force them to abort their children. It's forced abortion. The next one, you see that the slogan is that spit it out and take it out, whatever way we use, it should not allow the birth to be given. Bottom there is another one that if you don't abort, they will destroy your house and take your cow. Take your cow means they take your property if you don't do the abortion. So that usually when you talk about social control, this level of social control in Mao's time, it's everywhere. Not only in one-child policy, other policy as well. For example, of course, there's a policy that you can't attack Chinese leaders, communist leaders. So if you say something, you did something, they arrest you and put you in jail. Sometimes people got shot. And you have other policies, say you can't move. So you can't sneak out of your village. If you do, okay, you got arrested and came home. They in consent took away your earning or something. It's an overall control. But after the reform, the one-child policy only remained super effective team. The Chinese government still control. I'm not sure. Am I making myself clear so far?
No, it is pretty hard the way the lifestyle was.
What I explained about the one-child policy and its team, it's little hard or very hard for people who never live in China, who don't study China, to understand. Because for as modern human as us, how do you understand slavery? How do you understand that the party actually control your body? It's very difficult. So if you look at Chinese constitution, the whole one-child policy is very illegal. That was the reality. And through the one-child policy, the Chinese Communist Party kept a very effective team to control every household, to monitor every household. So now let's move to the next slide.
So how does all this tie in with what is happening in Shanghai now?
Well, that's the question coming. Yes.
Okay.
What happened in Shanghai during the one-child policy time? The Shanghai people, of course, very obedient, have one-child policy, and to the extent China quickly, urban areas of China especially, quickly went to the same route of the industrial West, which means not one-child policy was not a problem. And Shanghai, well, is developed, and its young people prefer either not to get married or only have one child, because raising a child became enormously expensive. So that's what happened in Shanghai, and the Shanghai people for a while was quite content because they have the highest income in the country. They lead the economy. They also have basically Shanghainese think they are part of the global economy. The Shanghainese think they not only they have some political power, which several powerful leaders came from Shanghai, and also they all foreign business. If they want to business in Shanghai, especially want to get in finance, they go to Shanghai. Shanghai is the economic heart of China. Beijing is the political heart. Shanghai is the economic heart in China. So Shanghai has been very proud, and everybody thought, well, we are in a global economy and we have freedom, which, compared to Mao's time, they had a lot of freedom. I talked to many people from Shanghai, and they believe they have better freedom than people in the US. Because, not only they can do business whatever way they like to do, unlike US, we have so many rules. They also enjoy this freedom of movement. If you want to move from Shanghai or anywhere, you are, of course, no problem, and you can move abroad, you can go where. And, if you talk to people in Shanghai 5 years ago, they would say, they have all the freedom they need. And then what happened? COVID happened. But before COVID, Xi Jinping happened. So we need to explain what who Xi Jinping is, what Xi Jinping is. We talk a lot about Xi Jinping, but let's focus on his policy. In the recent years, in the past, say 5 years, I was thinking, the clear turns from 2017. And Xi Jinping launched a counter-reform. I call it a counter-reform. Is basically, his policies were designed to go back to the Mao time or to earlier China. And it's not that he wants the economy to turn into pre-industrial Chinese economy. No, he just wants to re-establish political and the social control. So for political control, it's also, he used the name, in the name of anti-corruption, he got rid of a lot of his political rivals. And they were corrupt for sure, but he got rid of his rivals. Social control is a bigger issue though. Political control, you need to control the party system, do this. But social control, you have to aim at controlling people. So he actually tried to strengthen the household registration system. He actually managed to suppress China's budding free press, closed a lot of magazines and put the party control in this or that. And also, he tried to control the private economy by ordering all the private business to establish its own party branch. That means if you're a foreign investor, you have a party branch in your factory, which, what a party branch did. If you look at traditional companies, the Chinese under Mao's time, the party leader was number 1 in the factory. The factory manager was number 2. So the factory director is number 2. The party controls everything, especially the party controls everybody start CA and control people, personnel. But when you have a private economy, when you have private factories, it's not that easy. Even you have a party branch, so this party the party members, they have meetings. After that, they may cause some problem, but the manager, the owner, is still the owner. So what happens that in the past few years, she began to realize the private business owners or the very rich man might be his problem. Not his rivalry, but well, they may be too independent to him. So he actually started to crash private business. What we see is Jack Ma's case. Jack Ma disappeared for a while, and Tencent, which is the biggest telecom company in China, and he just took their property. And he's taking other people's property gradually. But a lot of people thought, why would Xi Jinping do that? He doesn't need the money. And why would he do this to destroy or to damage China's private economy? Power, that's why. He would not allow any power which can independently operate, especially when they have some connections in the party, they control this. So Xi has done a lot of damage to private economy. But still, he has the very major problem, how to get control, how to get mouse kind of control. Say, if I'm a citizen, how do you control me? I want to go there together with my friends and to yup and say, we don't like Xi Jinping. How do you control that? And he found ways to control that. First, it's not only him, it's the China. They have the whole electronic system which monitors everyone. When cell phone appeared, everybody thought it was a tool of freedom. I remember once I also gave a lecture on cell phones, and China in a few years jumped into the first cell phone country in the world. So I gave a lecture there. I got millions of listeners. I was very happy. But very soon, the government turned the cell phones into the social control tools. The first thing they did was to turn cell phone into monitoring rules. I remember once a few friends of mine from China came to my house. And we are going to have a nice dinner and a meeting and chat about Chinese politics. First, everybody took out their cell phone from China. I have a US cell phone, their cell phones from China. Everybody put their cell phone, put in a plastic bag and sealed it and put in my refrigerator. I said, what the hell are you doing? Why is that? He said, well, so they cannot monitor us. I said, what do you mean they cannot monitor us? Well, only you put in the refrigerator, they could not listen to what we say. I said, well, they have been monitoring you all the time. Yes, the GPS system follow you everywhere. So the Chinese government, that dinner, my friends, very active friends, they know the Chinese government in China. No, we had dinner. It is that much. So you read China's some prison records, some confession, and the police would, people went to jail. They would come out to say, the police say, at this and that point, you are here. At that and that point, you are there. So if you bring your Chinese cell phone abroad, that's what happened. But people have to, because otherwise they would lose their communication with their family. But that's only one way. People have ways to get rid of. People say, if I don't bring my cell phone with me, and I leave my cell phone home, or leave my cell phone somewhere and go to meet my friends, and we do something like that. So here comes the COVID. When COVID happened, well, China was a little unscrambled at that time, but very soon they developed a host using COVID to develop the whole system to control people. Now, the main thing, let's go to the next slide. See that green code up there?
Yeah.
It's a green QR code. That is called your safety code.
Yeah.
And when the safety code is green, when you have to show your code anywhere, entering a market, going to a bus, going to an airplane, going to another neighborhood, you have to scan in your code. If your code is yellow, that means you are restrained and you can only go in your neighborhood. They suspect you. If that code turns into red, you are practically jailed in your home. You are in prison. You can't go anywhere. And with that code, the second you scan that code in, everything will pop up on your phone, will pop up in government's computer. That is your health record. When your last time go doing testing, if you don't do tests for a few days, the code will turn yellow. And where did you go? They have all your life, entire set of data. The government has all the data. It's all done automatically. It's all done with machine, with all the AI technology. So the government can even reduce its police forces. It's all AI now. So with that code, you control your life. So how about if I go out, I lost my phone. So if you lost your phone, you'll not be able to go home. And you have to go through enormous trouble to get yourself another phone, another code. And it's now, I am not joking, but it's a real proposal today to inject some chips to people's body. So the government can actually monitor you and trace you. So if we go up to the slides, and you'll see, people, police checking your QR code and all that. Anyway, go to the next slide. So now you see today in Shanghai. What you saw in Shanghai, you see the center picture there. You see that in the back of that white coat, it said police. Mm-hmm. And others are not police, but they are, that white coat tells people that's the person of authority. You have to subject to whatever person with authority, and that's Shanghai. So what I think, why Shanghai is such a test. Shanghai, for many years, was the most liberal city in China. It published a lot of magazines and, semi-independent, and it has a very modern economy. It has the most foreigners living in and talk to the world. How do you isolate a city of Shanghai? How do you rebuild your control over Shanghai and the Shanghai people? Now we see it. We see it with COVID, with Shanghai as a test. The Communist Party of China, it's now rebuilt its social control. Control everybody, control every move. And they rebuild it in big cities first. If big cities they can build, they can certainly build in other places, in rural areas, And so far, from Shanghai, when you see this, when everybody is enslaved, you hear some protest, but you don't see big demonstrations. You see the party system, this newly established control, it's working. And who are those white coat people? You see police. Also, you see many neighborhoods. Who are they? I talked to people in Shanghai. They said, they are talking in Beijing and other cities. They said the Chinese simply remobilized the one-child policy team. One-child policy was abandoned. Well, the Chinese population is shrinking, so China has to rebuild its population. So the one-child policy abandoned. And then meanwhile, COVID happened. So the entire one-child policy control mechanism is remobilized to become the COVID control system. And this Shanghai, again, the COVID control policy looks so stupid. But if you come from the angle of social control, it is not. It's testing if the system works. So far, it works. And that is what really worries me.
Well, Big Brother is what comes to my mind. And George Orwell's 1984 book. And the name of the book is 1984, and it's Big Brother watching. I think Xi Jinping may have read this book. It certainly looks like a page right out of there. Sasha, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on this. And we'll come back and look at this again when a little bit more clarity emerges from Shanghai. Thank you very much. And we'll be back. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Oh, that's so much it, and that's a lot to discuss and discuss it further. But I think most experts nowadays got it wrong. They thought, well, it's so stupid and not very. It shows the disorganization of the Chinese government. No, it shows the reorganization of the Mao's time.
Yes, indeed. We all knew, at least I knew, that Shanghai is where the politics of China was. And now they are trying to stifle that. Thank you so much, Sasha. We have to wait and see what's going to play out. And as always, viewers, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel and click on the bell button. Namaskar.
Thank you.